Imagine you're an elephant. You're 40 years old, you've walked these same dry plains your whole life, and right now you're moving through tall grass with the rest of your family, doing what elephants do, and then you stop. Not because of a sound, and not because the wind carried water. You stop because of a shape in the dust ahead of you. Bones. Big ones. The pale, sun-bleached curve of a skull and the long reach of a tusk. And something in you goes quiet. You reach out with your trunk, slow, and you touch it. You turn it over, gently, the way you might handle something that still matters. The others gather in around you, and for a long while, nobody moves. Here's the strange part. Those bones don't belong to anyone you ever knew. And you stopped anyway. Look, we've all seen some version of this. The elephant standing over the bones. The dog that won't leave a body. The whale pushing her dead calf up through the water. And we look at it and we feel something land in the chest and we think the obvious thought. That's grief. They're mourning. But here's the question worth holding on to for the next 20 minutes. Because the honest answer turns out to be a lot stranger than a simple yes. Is grief actually what we're looking at? Stay with me. Because that one little word, grief, is doing a huge amount of quiet work in that sentence, and it's worth slowing down on. When we say an animal grieves, we're smuggling in a whole stack of assumptions at once. We're assuming it knows the other one is dead. On top of that, it kind of has to understand that dead means gone permanently, not just sleeping, not just sick. And somewhere in there, all of that is supposed to arrive wrapped in a feeling, some version of loss. So that's really three separate things, and an animal could honestly have any one of them without the other two, which means the real question isn't the soft one we opened with. It's sharper. What does an animal actually understand about death? And where does the understanding stop and the feeling begin? So let's actually look at this properly, and let's start with a fact it's easy to skip right past. Most animals, when they come across a dead member of their own kind, do basically nothing. A dead mouse to another mouse is just a thing on the ground, no vigil, no pause, the body just has no special pull at all. And that's exactly what makes the exception so interesting, because there's a short, strange list of animals that break this rule hard. Elephants, the great apes, dolphins and whales, crows, a handful of others. And these are, not by accident, some of the biggest-brained, most intensely social creatures on the planet, the ones who live their whole lives recognizing specific individuals. When they meet their dead, something genuinely does happen. So the whole question is what? Now, before we get to the touching part, it's worth asking what understanding death would even take, because it's stranger than it sounds. For a long time, scientists treated it like a towering achievement, the kind of thing maybe only humans could ever pull off. To really get death, you'd have to grasp that a dead thing stops working, that it won't start back up, that it'll happen to everyone, including you. Heavy stuff, right? But here's a quietly radical idea that's been gaining ground in the field over the last few years. What if understanding death is actually cheap? Think about it from the animal side for a second. If you're a predator or your prey, telling the living from the dead is one of the single most useful skills you can own. A gazelle that can read, that lion is a carcass, not a threat, gets to keep grazing. A wrong guess in the other direction gets it killed. So natural selection has every reason to wire a rough death detector into a huge range of animals. No philosophy degree required, honestly. And that quietly flips the whole thing around. Maybe the real surprise was never that some animals seem to get death. It's honestly that we spent so long assuming they couldn't. Okay, so let's go back to the elephants, because they're the clearest case we've got. For decades, the people who spend their entire lives out there watching wild elephants kept reporting the same eerie thing. A family would come across the remains of another elephant, and they'd stop, and they'd start to investigate the bones with their trunks and their feet, slow and almost careful, sometimes standing in near total silence for a long stretch of time. One field researcher described it as the kind of quiet where it feels like even the birds have stopped singing. For years, that was honestly just a pile of stories. Then in 2006, a controlled experiment in Amboseli in Kenya finally put it to the test. They took skulls and ivory and bones from elephants, plus bones from buffalo and rhinos, and laid them all out for wild elephant groups to find. And the elephants were not equally interested. They spent noticeably more time touching and exploring the elephant skulls and the ivory than anything else on offer. Buffalo bones? Barely a glance. The whole thing ran in the journal biology letters, and the result is honestly genuinely hard to shrug off. These animals can pick their own dead out of a field of mixed bones. And here's the part that gets me. They do it even when the bones belong to an elephant they never met. It isn't about her, specifically. It's about what she was. And while we're standing here, let's quietly retire one beautiful myth. You've probably heard about the elephant graveyard, the secret place old elephants supposedly wander off to die, all their bones somehow gathering in one sacred spot. Great story. It just isn't real. Bones cluster in certain places for pretty boring reasons, like a lot of animals dying near the last water they were searching for in a drought. And what's actually true turns out to be stranger and frankly better than the legend. Elephants don't keep a graveyard. They carry the recognition of their dead around with them, everywhere they walk, ready to stop for any set of elephant bones they happen across, related to them or not. The map isn't out there in the dirt. The recognition travels with them. Now here's where it gets genuinely strange. Move from elephants over to chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, and the behavior turns more intimate and a good deal harder to watch. When a chimpanzee infant dies, the mother more often than not simply will not put it down. She carries the body. She grooms it, kind of constantly. She keeps it with her as she travels and feeds and sleeps, sometimes for days on end. A long-running study at Gombe in Tanzania, published in 2020, pulled together 33 of these cases. Most of the time, the carrying lasted a day or two, with a median of under 2 days. But that tidy average hides the outliers. And honestly, the outliers are the part that stay with you. In one small community in West Africa, a mother carried her infant's body for at least 27 days until it had dried and mummified in the heat. In a forest in Uganda that researchers have now watched for 40 straight years, one mother carried her dead infant for 3 months. Think about that for a second. 3 months. And before you decide she just didn't grasp that the baby was gone, here's the detail that complicates everything. Researchers have watched chimpanzee mothers do things they never do to a living infant. They lay the body down, step back, and stare at it from a distance. One was seen pressing her fingers to the dead infant's neck, the way you might check for a pulse. That doesn't look like confusion to me. That looks like a creature carefully gathering information about a thing it already half understands. And look, it isn't only the animals with hands. In the summer of 2018, off the coast of the Pacific Northwest, a killer whale gave birth and the calf died within about half an hour. What happened next got watched by basically the whole world. The mother just refused to let the body sink. She balanced it on her head, pushed it up through the water, and every time it slipped off, she dove down and got it again. She did this for 17 days, across something like 1,000 miles of open ocean. 17 days. So people, of course, started calling it a tour of grief, and honestly, it's hard to land on a better word watching the footage. Whatever was running through that whale, it cost her an enormous amount of energy, and she paid it over and over, day after day, for a body that was already gone. And the whale isn't some one-off either. Mother dolphins, who are basically small whales with much better PR, have been seen doing the exact same thing, over and over across totally separate sightings in different oceans. A calf dies and the mother carries or nudges the little body for days, falling behind her group, skipping meals, just holding on. So, honestly, this isn't one freak animal having one strange day that happened to get caught on camera. It's a pattern, and it shows up wherever these big social ocean-going brains live. Which tells you something all on its own. Whatever's driving this is built in, not improvised on the spot. It's old. And it's strong enough to push an animal to act flat against its own survival, against eating, against keeping up with the others, all for the sake of staying close to something that can't be saved. So why does a corpse stop these animals in their tracks at all? There's a pretty neat idea for this, and it comes from looking at crows and elephants and whales and apes all at once. A living body and a dead body share this deeply unsettling overlap. The dead one still looks like the animal you knew. Same shape, same face, same smell, at least at first. But it's gone still in a way that living things just never are. And researchers have a phrase for the glitch that creates. They call it an animacy detection malfunction. Your brain runs a fast automatic little system for sorting the world into alive and not alive, and a fresh corpse jams it. It pings us both at the same time. And that contradiction, the thing that is clearly your friend and also clearly is not, produces exactly the behavior people keep seeing at these scenes. Approach, retreat, approach again. It's the same magnetic, uneasy pull you feel standing in front of a doll that looks a little too real. We even gave the human version of that feeling a name. The uncanny valley. Okay, so that's the case for grief, and it's a strong one. Big brain, deeply social animals doing slow, heavy, costly things around their dead. But wait, because here's where we have to be careful, and it's where the whole story quietly tilts. Not every animal that gathers around its dead is mourning. So, take crows. If a crow dies in your neighborhood, other crows will usually show up, a whole noisy crowd of them, calling and circling and making an absolute scene. People call it a crow funeral, and it's easy to see why. It honestly looks like a wake. But a study published back in 2015 in the journal Animal Behavior suggests the crows aren't there to say goodbye at all. They're just there to learn. The researchers used stuffed dead crows to stage these little scenes, and what they found is telling. The crows weren't grieving the body. They were studying it for danger. What killed this one? Is this place unsafe now? Is that human standing nearby the reason? And get this. The crows could learn to recognize and scold a specific person they'd seen near a dead crow after a single encounter, and then they'd hold on to that face for about 6 weeks. So that's not a funeral. That's a neighborhood watch. And it runs even deeper than crows. Now go all the way down to insects, and you find ants that haul their own dead straight out of the nest the moment a corpse starts giving off one particular chemical. No sorrow, no ceremony. Just a hardwired cleanup reflex, triggered by a smell. And the point there is simple, but it matters. A reaction to the dead is not the same thing as grief. An ant carrying a corpse and a whale carrying a corpse can look like cousins and be nothing alike on the inside. So whenever we catch an animal doing something around death, the honest move is to slow down and ask which one we're actually watching. A blind reflex, cold reconnaissance? Or something a lot closer to what we feel, which lands us in the uncomfortable middle of all of this. The part the scientists themselves are the most honest about. We just cannot ask them. There's a whole young field built around exactly this question now. It's called Comparative Thanatology, which is basically a heavy name for a simple thing, the study of how animals deal with their dead. And the people working in it will tell you, flatly, that we don't fully know what's happening inside that elephant, or that chimpanzee, or that whale. We can measure what they do. We just plain can't measure what they feel. And there's a trap sitting here waiting for all of us, and researchers in the field name it out loud. We tend to only count something as grief when it looks like our grief. The whale who carries her calf moves us because we would do the very same thing. But the mother who instead eats part of the body, which also happens, horrifies us, and we quietly file it under cold, or broken, or not grief. Except that's our lens, not hers. An animal doesn't share our funerals or our taboos. Its way of reckoning with a death might be entirely real, and also entirely unlike anything we'd recognize on sight. And honestly, that should make all of us a little more humble about how confident we tend to sound. And this is where it stops being a fact about animals and quietly starts being about us. Look again at what these behaviors might actually be for. The crow gathers to learn what's dangerous. The elephant pauses, maybe, to update something about a world that just shifted under it. And if we're honest with ourselves, our own funerals do a fair bit of that too. We gather, we take in that the world is different now. We tell each other, without words, that it's safe to keep going. So the clean line we love to draw, the one where humans grieve and animals merely react, gets blurry the longer you stand and stare at it. Because here's the thing the crows and the whale and that chimpanzee mother are all pointing at together. The behaviors around death we assumed made us human might be far, far older than us. Not invented at some funeral, somewhere by some clever ancestor, inherited, sitting in the same deep, wordless place that makes a whale refuse to let go. And honestly, there's one last thing, the thing that keeps the cold explanation from just winning outright. Reconnaissance explains the crows. It does not explain 3 months. A chimpanzee mother carrying a dried, mummified body around for 3 months is not learning anything about danger. There is no new information left in that body by the second week. Whatever she's doing, it isn't research, and it isn't a reflex. It's something she can't seem to stop doing for a small creature that used to be hers. And we don't have a clean scientific word for that yet. But you do. You've felt the shape of it. So go back one last time to where we started. You're the elephant, standing over a scatter of bones in the dust that never belonged to anyone you knew. For the longest time, we just assumed an animal couldn't possibly understand what it was looking at. Now, we're honestly not so sure. And maybe it doesn't grieve the way you grieve, but it might do something we don't really have the language for yet. Something quieter, that lives in the same ancient hardware our own grief grew out of. We may never get to ask it. But the silence that falls over that herd, the slow reach of the trunk, the way nobody moves, that was never nothing. We just spent a long time telling ourselves it had to be, because it didn't arrive with our words attached to it. If you want more of these, the kind that change how the ordinary world looks on the way home, stick around. There's a new one every week. Same world, different lens.